That is very high praise. It was a lot of work in 3 months to raise all that money. So my name is Hugh. I'm a product marketing manager at Samsara. And so today I want to talk to you about some of the lessons that I've learned. In my experience, both in my past role, I was at a company called 3D Robotics. We were an enterprise software company specifically in the drone space. So we were pushing into a market that's a smaller company. I was the first product marketing hire. And then just recently, about 3 months ago, I joined Samsara. For those of you who might not be familiar with us, we are an internet-connected sensor and camera company. We're based just down the road here in San Francisco in the Potrero Hill neighborhood. And today, really, I want to kind of tie together those two experiences. So first, basically the tool tips and strategies that I learned and put into place as a product marketing lead at a small company as a way for us to, in one way, just stay sane in dealing with all the inbound requests that we have, but also have an outsized impact for our team. And then how we can build on that at a company like Samsara and actually start to think about how do we scale a product marketing function? How do we scale at a company that isn't really in a period of hypergrowth? And so those are really the main things I want to cover today. Again, coming from Samsara, we are essentially the leader in industrial IoT. So what does that mean? We basically were started in 2015 with the goal to bring technology to a lot of the businesses and operations that power our economy that were basically historically underserved by technology. So think about businesses like transportation and trucking and logistics and food and beverage delivery or construction, companies and industries that you wouldn't typically think of as being very tech forward. We essentially were started with the goal to help bring internet-connected technology and sensors to their businesses, to help them work more efficient, more safe, and more sustainably. And really the main way in which we do that is through our fleet management platform. So if you own a fleet of vehicles and you want to track them all in real time through a single dashboard, if you want to ensure your drivers are kept safe with dash cameras that can help exonerate them if they get into an incident or ensure that they're being coached to actually drive safer, these are the sort of things that we do as a company. And as I mentioned, we were founded in 2015, and so the growth so far has been pretty incredible. We have over 10,000 customers. We passed that mark just a couple weeks ago. We are expanding in a number of different product groups and geographies. And I share this mostly to help highlight the challenges and the opportunities that we have as a team of now 8 product marketers. This is a lot of work for us to do with a company of over 1,300 people. We, a year ago, had only 1 product marketer. I think about 6 months ago, there were 4 of them. And now myself and a few more have joined. And really, this is now in the stage where we're building out that function and trying to actually scale our impact and the work that we do across our company. And so first, I want to talk about how can we get there. If I can go back to the time in which I was the first product marketing hire, I'm sure many of you have been in that case as well. And I want to know, maybe just by a show of hands, how many of you guys have seen this before or read this book, Crossing the Chasm? Great. That's a lot of you. I was very curious. So really, if you're familiar with this already, but the chasm is that gap between, as you're just starting out, you have a PM, you have a PMM, you're pushing into the market. And what's that gap that a lot of you face with pushing into the early majority, into that broader, more mainstream market? So it was a book written by a guy named Jeffrey Moore, and it's essentially something that we all struggle with, and that every startup struggles to actually cross this chasm. And so I think a lot of us, having read the book and know the lessons that Moore had to share, whether it's you need to have a complete solution, or you need to focus on a beachhead market, and then focus and land and expand from there. I think we know a lot of those lessons. So for me, when starting in my role, my concern and my thought was, how do we actually execute on that? How do we do that when we have a team of 2 people, for example? And so what I wanted to do is essentially put together a few different, like a toolkit or a playbook of sorts as to things I've done that were effective for me and our team to help us actually get initial traction in pushing into this market. First, it was a matter of prioritization. How do we prioritize the features we launch? Then we adopted a sprint cycle model, something that we learned from our product team. They worked in an agile model, and we try to apply that to how we work as a marketing team. Then how can we get more leverage out of our launch days? Just as a small team where we can only work on so many launches, we only have so many opportunities to speak to our customers and to the market. How do we get more bang for our buck out of each of these launches? Then lastly, how do we turn our customers into advocates? Moore talks a lot about the value of customer advocacy as a way to gain trust with the early majority, as a way to actually help cross the chasm. And so I want to talk about some ways in which we actually were able to do that in practice. So first, and something that's really important to me, both at a small company and also in a larger one, is how we can better prioritize how we actually announce features. So this is something that is really difficult, right? You have product managers who want a press release or a blog post for every announcement they make, even though if you don't think it actually deserves that. You have so many opportunities as a software company where you release hundreds of features every year. And for you and for all of us as marketers, we're excited about what we do. We are excited about all the features we're releasing. But we only have so many opportunities to speak to our audience, to have their trust. And so how can we better prioritize them in a way that both helps communicate to our product team and to our internal stakeholders what we're going to be doing and what we don't think is important. And we know a lot of this intuitively, but this is really a way for us to build a system around that. And what I've found and what has worked for us is essentially prioritizing along two main categories. First, will this new feature drive growth across our customer base, or will it help us retain our existing customers? And second, is this something that's brand new, whether new just for our industry or for our company? Or is it something that we're building to get to parity with one of our top competitors? And then essentially, we'll categorize all of these different and prioritize them all along the spectrum from a P1 or a tier 1 all the way down to a priority of a P4. And so a P1, for example, we're a hardware company. A hardware is typically going to be a P1 launch. There's a lot of work involved. There's a lot of stakeholders where you're going to do a lot of activities relating to that. So whether it be a press release or a launch video or a more extended beta program where you have a lot of customers using it in early access, where then you can actually get them to provide testimonials. These are all things that you're going to put a lot of weight behind as a P1. And with a P2, this is something that you feel is going to drive growth, but it's largely a feature that you're building because it's been blocking deals, for example. One of your competitors has it, you haven't had it. And so you want to be able to make a lot of noise around this as a P2, but it doesn't necessarily need the same amount of support or lift behind it as a P1 might. And then a P3 will be something that we would consider to be a new offering, but one that was largely built to help retain customers. So this could be something that a lot of your existing customers have requested, used a common feature request that has come up. And so it's something that you're building largely for NPS and to build and to help make your customers happier. And then a P4, this is going to be typically just a Me Too feature or something that you're building for that's going to be already exists in the market, something that essentially you're doing to help retain existing customers. And so this is not really meant to be prescriptive. A lot of companies tier and prioritize in different ways. This is what I found to be effective in a small team, where then we're able to actually map a lot of how we prioritize these tiers to a set of activities where I'm not going to go through the whole list. You can see and pull from it there, but basically the idea is that we have a list where, in a really more give or take way, these are the activities that we'll undertake as product marketers, where then that gives us a clear piece of communication to the rest of our stakeholders of we decide on what these priorities are with our PMs, then we communicate to the rest of the organization so everyone is on the same page going into a launch as to what we're going to be doing and how we'll actually deliver on that. And I think if you were to go along with this process of following a launch, the next step for us is how can we actually, as a smaller company, stay responsive to a lot of the different needs that we have while actually targeting and tracking towards that launch. We have a lot of different inbound requests from you have sales that need a one-pager or a slide deck to help with an upcoming deal. These are things that we want to be responsive to while also keeping your eye on the prize and tracking towards that launch. And so I mentioned the sprint cycle model, and I'm sure some of you might already do this, and we found this to be really effective. So this is essentially a way for us to take inbound requests from all the stakeholders across our company, and also just ideas that we have as a marketing team. So if we know that we're working on a launch, and I establish what those tiers are, I'll put those all in as requests that we can then add essentially to a backlog. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. It can be a very lightweight Google Sheet where it's a backlog that you can have a form that people can fill in, and then it gets added to this backlog for you to review. And then it follows essentially, for those of you familiar with agile sprint cycles, this model of every week, we would do it on Fridays because it helps us plan the week ahead. That sprint where we prioritize all the inbound requests that have come in, and then we actually this essentially gives us a mandate for the week ahead to say, this is what we're focusing on, and if there's anything else or requests that come in along the way, we'll intake them, but won't be working on them over the course of that week. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a week. It's going to depend on what works best for you. But for us in a smaller company, that quick turnaround was what we really, after trying a few different cycles, what we found to work best for us. And then you execute on that. And then at the end of the week, you review what was done. If anything wasn't done, you start to explore why. And then typically every other week, we also do sprint retrospectives. So this isn't reviewing the tasks and the work that you did, but this is more exploring how you're working as a team. Is this model working? So for example, we first started out by doing this on a 2-week sprint. And just with the pace that we worked at, that wasn't enough time. And so through a sprint retro, our team, and again, this is a team of 2, so this is really just my other marketing team guy and I, but this was really something that we found helped us actually just examine, are we working well and how can we improve on that? And that really helped us just connect a lot of the ways in which we're working and also, I think, communicate to the rest of our team that we can work in a more efficient way and in a way that helps a lot of our stakeholders understand how we work. So even if you're at a smaller startup where you need to be a lot scrappier, these are some of like the tools that we found really worked in a way in which we could still be strategic and responsive without actually over-architecting our process. And this is just an example of how this works. So this is a Google Sheet where you'll have all the different requests that come in, and you can prioritize them and give them a weight. And then you can actually start to plan your sprints from there. And so for many of us, we know that when you're tracking towards a launch, especially if you're a smaller team without a lot of resources, without a lot of bandwidth, we know that you only have so many opportunities to launch P1 or P2 products. And so for us, one of my priorities and something I really learned is to try to get as much leverage and longevity out of each launch as we possibly could. So these are just some examples. Obviously, you're going to do a lot more for a major launch, but this is really just to illustrate the point that when you launch a product, especially at a smaller startup, you're going to have all these activities that go into launch day, and you want to be just done after that. But where you can get a lot of value is by actually, and we like to use the phrase of taking your product on a book tour or take it on a road show. And so what can you do now that it's in the world and that it exists and that you can demo it? What can you actually do to get it in front of people? So things that we did that were low lift, low cost, hosting training webinars, going to events and trade shows and speaking about it, enabling our customers to speak about this product now that it's live, and then also trying to get some earned media around it. So we would write guest blogs as a way to say, this is more of a trend piece, this is what's happening with the market overall, this is how a product like ours can help solve that, and it's something that we would do for our new products. So we planned for the activities that we would do leading up to a launch, but also we tried to take a look and be really thoughtful about what we did 30, 60, 90 days after a launch as well. And the last thing before I shift into product marketing at scale would be some of the ways in which you can actually just better empower your customers, especially at that pre-chasm phase where you need customer testimonials, you need customer advocacy to actually help you make that leap. And really we found there to be 3 main sort of actionable ways in which have been effective for me in doing that. First, turning a lot of your beta users, the ones who are actually using your product before it launches, into case studies and testimonials on launch day. So not only do you have a launch blog post, but you have a case study on a customer who used it for the 6 weeks prior, got some value out of it, were able to speak well to it, and you're able to actually inform a lot of the messaging that goes into that post as well. That helps you get a lot more leverage and a lot more, I think, credibility with what you're launching immediately on launch day. The second, actually getting them involved, and that's just activities that you can do in addition to a case study. So say, one of the things that we often did was actually getting customers to give a quote for a press release that we can to say how this new solution will help solve their problems. And supporting their talks at industry events. So just as a story, we were able to, I pulled these 3 because we were actually able to do with one of our biggest customers in my prior role, we were able to actually get them to participate in all 3 for one of our major launches. And we saw that really as a major win. And this is especially for smaller teams who don't have a customer marketing manager or someone who's just dedicated to actually reaching out to customers all day and give you a good sense of who would be the best to reach out to. This is something that we would just reach out and start to build these relationships with our customers so then we can get them on board and actually be a champion for our product, which in the long run helps us go a lot further than if it was just us speaking about it ourselves. So these are some examples of, I think, what worked at a smaller startup, but when you move into a larger organization, we really wanted to build on that and start to think not only how we can go from working in a startup, but how we can actually scale that up. And not only scale just as a company, but how can we scale the impact that we have as a product marketing team. So our team is 8 people, a company over 1,300 people. And so we're really starting to think about how can we build for the long term is one of the key principles that we have as a company. How can we consider not only what we're doing right now and do it so better, but how do we build the plane as we fly it, so to speak? What's going to happen in 5, 10 years from now? And how can we plan for that? Second principle we have is really how we can obsess over our customers. So these are customer centricity is really something that at Samsara, and I think at a lot of great companies, it's something that is baked into every process that we have. It's what helps settle debates. It's that obsession and concern over what's best for the customer. And so these are some things, along with being able to adopt a growth mindset and constantly learning, is really the core of how we think about building for scale. And then specific to our marketing team and to our department overall, there's really 3 main ways in which we've structured our operating model to do that. So first is through OKRs, objectives, key results, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. This is something that we use individually to help plan what we're going to do on a quarterly basis. But what's cool about this is that, at least in our case, is that our OKRs are planned and we have visibility not only just to what our whole marketing department is doing, like I can go in and see what demand gen's OKRs are, and I can understand how we can influence each other and actually help support each other meet those goals. But these OKRs, at least at Samsara, ladder up all the way up to our CEO and to our executive team. And so that's something that really helps set that amount of transparency that helps us actually build for scale and understand how we can best support each other. Second would be our KPIs. Again, these are just key business metrics that, as marketers, we're trying to hit. Then the third being our talent development framework, so ways in which we can actually support our team with the goals that they're trying to reach and what they want to do personally and professionally. And so this essentially forms the core of how we work. This was something that we implemented even just 3 or 4 months ago, where as the team grew, it's about twice the size than it was about 6 months ago. We knew that if we were going to be able to scale and actually build for the long term, if that was one of our goals, without these 3 pillars of our operating model, it wouldn't be sustainable. It's not something that we'd be able to actually successfully do. And within that, as PMMs, we've essentially structured our function around 4 main areas that we're trying to support. It's 4 really key business functions that we want to see ourselves really as sort of a center of excellence in terms of how we support them and also how we take in information and knowledge and needs from them as well. And so first being our product team, collaborating with them on launches. Our sales team, ensuring that they have all the competitive and product-related information they need to sell. Our customers and our customer success team, embedding and including their voice in everything we do. And then our revenue engine. So this is generally going to be our demand generation and our growth teams. Those are really the 4 main stakeholders that we at Samsara work to enable. And beyond that, there's also a way in which we try to actually organizationally sort of structure ourselves to do that in practice. And so what we've done is essentially dotted line mapped each PMM. There's about 8 of us, there's soon to be a few more, but each mapped to different business units that need our support. So for example, to make this real, I essentially personally support our account development reps and our commercial teams, our sales teams. We have other PMMs who support our mid-market and our enterprise teams. Each of these segments have very different needs. Our commercial teams, their sales cycles are a great deal shorter than our enterprise teams. They have very different needs and support from marketing. And so we have someone who's essentially, you could think of it as their account manager in ways in which they're the liaison between our marketing department and our product team to the rest of the broader sales organization. And when you have a sales team of over 600-700 people, this impact and having actually PMMs mapped to each different segment is a way for us, just as PMMs, to have really, I think, an outsized impact and be able to communicate the messages that we need to share in a really effective way to that broader sales team. So we also have sales teams that are industry specific. So for example, they're focused on pushing into the state and local government market. We have someone who's becoming an expert in that and trying to get up to speed on what that market needs, what makes it different. So then we can actually best enable our sales team to push into that market. And then lastly, we have a PMM who's mapped to our customer success and our support team. So they're thinking really about what's the customer journey? What are the touch points along the way that we could actually help contribute and add value to? Where are the gaps that we're finding? And so I think this is really interesting just as a way for us as PMMs to be that functional sort of center of excellence and help be able to have an impact, probably an outsized impact on the rest of the team. And this is something, so the next thing I want to dive into is this idea of putting the product on the shelf. I've heard once or twice that just in reading about what product marketing is and people defining it, that one definition was product puts product on the shelf and product marketing gets it off the shelf. And I think that's a pretty strong misconception as to how product marketing can support the product development process. And that was something that we really believed and wanted to get more involved in. And so this is essentially how we started to do it at Samsara. And it really goes in three main steps. First, we're involved in our beta program. We have something that we call an early access program, and of course with general availability. So first, with our beta, one of the first things we do whenever a PM will actually write a spec for a feature or a product requirements document is they'll share that with all the people on the product team, but also the PMMs. And then we're one of the reviewers and approvers on what that spec is to help us actually, given our knowledge of the market, our knowledge of what our customers need, it actually helps give them really valuable input that shapes what that feature is going to be. And so we have a lot of input at a very early stage where we're able to actually mold what that product will be and have impact on that. And second, while we're in the beta phase, we're able to actually use our connection with the customers and with customers that we know are strong advocates for us to actually get them involved and invite them to the beta. So a big part of that is also just finding the right people, because product often isn't going to be the team, or if depending on how your product group is organized, they're not often the ones that are speaking with customers as frequently as PMMs are. And second, early access. So once a product is passed all the gates it needs to pass in order to be launched out of beta, it's functional, it has strong uptime, whatever your metrics are. For us, and this is especially once we're moving and launching a hardware product, we move it into early access. And so we talk a lot, and PMMs talk a lot about validating messaging before a launch. And we found that early access is a really interesting and great way to do that. And then what we're doing here at this phase is actually selling the product to an early group of customers. That's essentially what makes it different from a beta. We'll be selling it to an early group of 100, 200 customers who are really interested in what we're offering. And it only helps us validate our message, but it also helps us refine a lot of the sales and marketing, sort of our go-to-market motions. And so these are things that for larger or more complex launches, like a P1 or a P2, these are what we found to be really helpful for us to be really confident going into launch day that we're going to be sure that this is going to work and that there's strong demand for it. And then lastly, of course, we support with all the related functions of a GA launch. So that's essentially both how we support our internal teams from sales, customer success, marketing, growth, to how we actually share and announce it to the world. And so on that note, once we've actually do launch products, we really, as Samsara, see our product marketing function as not only a function in which that does what I've described, that helps launch products and enable sales, but we really work very closely with a lot of their demand generation and what I referred to earlier as our growth engine, our revenue engine, sorry. This is something that we really try to focus on and quarterback as PMMs, given that we are essentially the product and competitive and industry experts. And so we do that in two main ways. First, being that we lead or essentially quarterback integrated campaigns. And so how this works is that the leader, we have a few different product groups, and the leader, essentially the team lead from our PMMs of that specific product group, will then be the leader of an integrated campaign to help drive awareness, adoption, leads for that product group. Say for our dash cameras that we recently launched, how can they improve safety? We have a PMM that's now leading an integrated campaign to best support that. And this really is something we put into place because we found that as a very fast-growing company, there's a lot that's going well, and there's a lot of activities that might be related to that product group or related to that theme that we're focused on, but there wasn't really a unified theme or a campaign that tied it all together and ensured that it had the right messaging, that it had the right customer intel and competitive intel included. And so this was by essentially having PMMs lead these integrated campaigns and quarterback them. It helps us all ensure that we're moving in the same direction and have a similar goal. And the second way that we actually do that is through speaking opportunities. So I think this might seem pretty straightforward, but one thing that we actually that has a lot of impact for us is really taking a hub and spoke model of when we, as PMMs, will take a speaking opportunity at a trade show or a conference. We do a lot of the upfront work in creating that slide deck and in defining what that messaging is. So say we're going to a state and local government conference and we are just learning about the market and we do a lot of upfront work by virtue of making a presentation. We then can use that and share a lot of those learnings and that content with the rest of our team, so then they can repurpose it. They can turn it into a blog post from our content team, or our growth team can take keywords from that and then start to run ads on it. And so we really see these speaking opportunities as a way for us to create essentially like a big rock piece of content that then the rest of our team can start to use and get value out of and to help drive the business. And the last thing, and a question I want to pose to the group is, do you know, we talk a lot about NPS, and that's from a customer perspective, how happy your customers are using your product, but consider what your NPS might be for your product marketing team. And that relates to, if you think about your own work as product marketers, as a product, how happy do you think your stakeholders are and actually how you're delivering on that? And that's something that we were asking ourselves a couple months ago. What do we think? It was just a question that was casually posed to the group. What do we think our NPS would be as a team? And this is a really interesting exercise. Like, it's something that helped us essentially. So what we did was we interviewed and surveyed our entire sales team, our customer success team, our marketing team, all the teams that we work with, and tried to understand how happy they are with the support that we were giving them. So we asked them questions like, do you feel confident in selling this product? Do you feel like you're getting the support you need from PMMs? And it really helped us test a lot of our assumptions and find that gap. So I think another thing to leave you with would be, NPS obviously is important, we all know that, but I think focusing on our internal NPS as product marketers has been a really valuable exercise for us and something that I definitely would recommend. And so the last thing before I wrap up, this is just a number that I had to throw up here. This was shared to me by my recruiting team. I guess you guys probably all expected this was coming at some point, but this was essentially the number of marketing hires that we're looking to add to the team just within this quarter. So that's not just PMMs, but it's across our whole marketing organization, but it's something that we're looking to hire for directors of PMMs, senior PMMs, also individual contributors. So if that'd be of interest to any of you guys, I'd be happy to chat with you. This is just a little shot of our team at our last company offsite. And so with that, I want to thank you all for taking the time. Thanks.
Outstanding.